Hello, and welcome to our Technically Speaking episode number 5. When I was on here 2 weeks ago, I mentioned something in passing that got a lot of you to ask me more questions, and I love that. So keep doing it. Now, the logical first question that I expected to get was, what did you make for lunch? And that has a very boring answer of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but we'll skip to the next group of questions that I got. I called out my team and I asked them to write some tests when they were done with their initial development. And many of you asked me something along the lines of, what kind of tests do developers write? And isn't that something that starts down the line with QA? And so I wanted to introduce everyone to the idea of test driven development, or sometimes you'll see it written as TDD. So, first question, what is it? When I get questions like these, I always like to do a Google search. If you Google test-driven development, you'll find this definition, and it's a little long, but test-driven development is a software development process relying on software requirements being converted to test cases before software is fully developed, and tracking all software development by repeatedly testing the software against all test cases. This is as opposed to software being developed first and test cases created later. There was a lot in there, so let's break it down. What I heard was write tests first, development later, then use those tests over and over to check your work. I don't want to overcomplicate the work though, so let's keep 2 rules in mind. We don't want to write more of a test than we need, and we don't want to write more code or configure more than we need to make those tests pass. The development style and rules I just mentioned seem to apply for a lot of developers. So let's think about that through the lens of Uncork. First, we're going to write a unit test using either the components unit test or the UDLC toolkit unit test or some other third-party software like Sauce Labs or Postman. When we run the test right after writing it, it should fail. It will fail. We haven't built out the story or the component or resolved the bug that we were aiming at. Next, we'll start our development work. We'll follow our regular processes and build out the story or fix the bug as simply as we can. Next, we rerun that test and it should pass. If not, we go back to development. And if it does pass, we go to simplify the configuration and the tests if needed. If the test is not targeting what we ended up doing, we need to resolve that. Then we'll rerun the test and repeat as many times as we need. Write the test, configure, run the test, simplify, run the test again. But now that that test is done for that unique story or bug fix, it doesn't get to sit back and relax. It's going to start its marathon training now. Every time that same developer or different developers on the team configure for a new story or a bug ticket after that first one is merged, that same test gets run again and again to make sure we didn't break anything. It also helps us pinpoint where we broke something if we did break it and see a change in behavior. These unit tests also make sure we're thinking about all use cases when we do our manual end-to-end and smoke tests for our work. But there is a question that we often see. Why would we want to add a step to write tests before we start building? It's just going to slow us down. And trust me, I thought that way for a while too. But here are some reasons that I would write my tests in advance and why test-driven development exists. Number 1, it makes sure all parts of the requirements are included while you're reviewing the ticket. If you're like me, I forget what I was doing 10 minutes ago, let alone if a ticket takes me a few days. So while I'm reading the requirements of the story in the beginning, I'm writing those tests so that I don't miss anything later. It also means that the requirements for the ticket are implemented with little to no wasted effort because I'm only writing configuration that's needed to make those tests pass and nothing else. Secondly, test-driven development enables faster innovation and continuous delivery because the application is already robust, flexible, and extensible. And that's because we've all written those tests. It's also easier to refactor or move configuration or code with minimal risk of unforeseen breakage because we'll run those tests and make sure the behavior doesn't change. Also, many teams report significant reduction in defect rates at the cost of a moderate increase in initial development effort. Nobody's denying that there's additional effort when developing, but reducing those defect rates means there's not rework. Those reduced defect rates also mean there's a reduction in defects from user acceptance testing, leading to an overall faster deployment. And if you've ever heard someone say, slow down to move faster, this is what they're talking about. For our QA folks listening out there, doing test-driven development means that by design, the application is easier to test, which means our QA process runs much more smoothly. And this last reason, it's not backed up by data, but it is what I hear from many of our veteran engineers. These veteran practitioners believe that test-driven development improves design quality and technical quality by making you slow down your development and really think about what you're going to do and the impact it will have. It allows you to take a step back before you jump in and just start building. But those benefits are almost exclusively for the development phase. There's also some developments post-development. The tests that we're building serve as documentation of our work and are examples of how to use the configuration and the application. So you can also think about them as executable specifications. And while they don't replace our application documentation or our Uncork Agile framework, they absolutely supplement it. I'm really excited about the use of test-driven development at Uncork. I think it makes everything a lot better. So if you want to learn more about test-driven development, let us know in the chat. We will continue to provide content on it with some of our engineering and QA experts at Uncork, including things like how to write a unit test, what tools we use, and where we're seeing engineering and quality assurance going within Uncork. We'll be back on November 18th. So until next time, keep asking questions.